Chadwick got away from Unsworth and got away from Stubbs and ticked it up for Cole. Studded away by Stam. Up the line from Silvestre. Time for Chadwick to turn and to drag it away from Bastich, who was standing still, and allowed Chadwick to hair away from him and play it in for Solskjaer, and it's come to Keane. They love nothing more than that.
When did football become serious for you?
I'm not sure if it ever became. I think it's always been something I've loved doing, whether it was at the start of my journey as a 6-7-year-old or even playing professionally. It never turned into a job. Obviously, there was massive ups and massive downs throughout my journey as a footballer, but I did thoroughly sort of enjoy the whole thing. So it never became, obviously it was a job that was serious, but it never became something where it was a worry to me or anything like that. I think I started playing probably as a 5-6-year-old just in the back garden with my dad and my brother. When I first really fell in love with the game was probably as a 8 or 9-year-old. The first time I was taken to a live football game, my dad took me to watch Cambridge United at the Abbey Stadium, and it really just blew my mind, just being amongst the crowd, being so close to the players, hearing the crowd singing, shouting, that sort of thing. The whole thing was electric to me. It really opened my eyes to what football was. Obviously, back in them days, there weren't much football on the telly, so to go to a live game was probably the easiest way you could get to experience live football. So that was probably a massive part of me wanting to be a footballer, going to watch live football. I think in where I'm from, like a little village in the south of Cambridge, when I first started playing organised football, it would have been as under 9. That was when it started. So as an 8-year-old child, I started playing, and what I was as a young kid was freakishly fast. So I could always run faster than everyone else. So when I first started playing, it was straight onto an 11-a-side football pitch with full-size goals, and there was 22 8 and 9-year-olds running around it, and I used to be the striker for my team. So what the tactic was, the other boys would kick the ball as hard as they could over the defenders' heads, and I could always run onto it and then just tap the ball in the goal. So it's probably that early success that I had, probably not that much different technically to the other boys, but because I was so fast, I got so much more joy and so much more success, and scoring loads and loads of goals was probably which gave me the confidence and the real drive to carry on playing, and then practicing in the garden for hours on end, and sort of being ahead of my peers because of my speed, but then getting further and further ahead of them because I got so much success. I wanted to practice more and more. So that was probably my earliest experiences of football, and sort of realising that I was probably more effective than the other players, and that giving me the confidence to carry on, and it becoming serious for me and something that could end up being a profession.
Yeah, that's really, I wasn't going to ask this question, but just hearing what you said there about, obviously you were really, really fast, so you were successful, but you said about, really, it gave you the confidence to really want to improve. And I mean, we've both seen it as coaches, and I'm sure many other people have seen it on various levels. There's, at a young age, you can be successful because you're quick or big or whatever it might be. And everyone's like, oh, blown away by this young lad who's fast or strong, and they get a lot of success. And then you see them 5 years down the line, and you feel as if they've really regressed. And sometimes I think there's a mindset already at that early stage, isn't there, where you've got to really want to keep improving, and despite being successful, and it's so easy to not not sort of practice as much because you are successful. I found it quite interesting you've said that. So was that, again, just something that you kind of feel as if your mindset was there from an early age to just keep improving?
Yeah, I think also because I played in grassroots football probably till the age of under 13. So I was always playing grassroots football and always sort of ahead of the group in terms of, because I'd score so many goals. I'm not sure, because I was a real quiet, shy lad who wouldn't sort of go out there and speak to people and that sort of thing. It was probably the amount of goals I was scoring why people knew I was, and probably made me quite a popular child, because I was so good at this particular sport. Whether I still would have had the same inclination to practice and carry on if I was brought up maybe in a different area of the country where there was a lot of highly gifted footballers in that area, where so I wasn't always seen as the best footballer in Cambridge or in the area that I lived. So I do think it was that early joy that made me want to carry on. But obviously carrying on, I realised that I'm absolutely loving this. Just even playing football in my garden, I used to live in sort of a fantasy world where I'd have my mum's football pools off the fridge, and I was just fantasising about playing with all the players. I learned all the players' names from getting Match and Shoot magazine and putting teletext on and looking for all the teams every Saturday afternoon and seeing who was playing. So it probably turned into a bit of an obsession. I just loved everything about the game, and it was probably the most time I spent playing football because obviously we're both coaches now, but it was never sort of the coaching. I obviously loved playing grassroots football. I can't remember any sort of tactical information or learning any particular skill there. All that I learned was probably on my own out in the back garden, just honing my own skills and doing different things and realising I can do this, I can do that. I'm going to try and do it in the game on the Saturday or the Sunday morning.
Absolutely. So how does a young lad from Cambridgeshire go to Man United?
Yeah, so probably as a under 10, under 11, 12, I started playing for like an area team called East Anglia Boys, where it'd be talented kids or perceived the best players from East Anglia would come together and we'd go on football tours. We went to Holland, Denmark, even went to America. Like, these were incredible experiences that I had. But this guy that sort of headed that up had big connections with Arsenal, so he'd sort of filter the better players into the Arsenal system. So as an under 13 player, I went and played for Arsenal. So I'd train once a week at Highbury, not on the pitch, obviously. There was like an indoor area out the back of one of the stands. So I go there on a Wednesday and play for my age group team on a Sunday. But also probably the big football back then was the schools football. So I'd play for Cambridge schools, a selection of the better players from all the schools in Cambridge. We'd play other area teams on a Saturday, where that was probably the most competitive football you'd play. So I was scoring a lot of goals doing that and forged quite a reputation. It was off the back of that a Man Utd scout come and watched me play for the schools team and was impressed enough to invite me up for a trial at the school holidays. So I went up there for a week in the school holidays, and off the back of that is how I ended up signing for the club.
Yeah. So you obviously get signed by United. What's kind of, when you experience your first training session, what's the sort of the biggest thing you were kind of taken back from in terms of the enormity of it? What's the biggest sort of thing you remember from that first session?
What I remember when I went up there for the first training session, when I was up there for the week, was how much I loved it. It turned into a bit of a, like I mentioned earlier, I was really quiet and shy. So going to different football clubs was always quite uncomfortable. I didn't know if I'd want to do it. And I didn't really like going to Arsenal that much. Obviously, fantastic football club, but it always felt like a bit of a pain having to get all the way there and then get all the way home. And I was more comfortable playing with my friends. But what I remember about Manchester United, the second I got there, the environment was just incredible. Like, all the coaches, all the other boys, they were so pleased to see you, and you felt like part of a family immediately. I remember the first training session, probably my first training session at a professional club. Obviously, I'd trained at Arsenal, Ipswich, a few other clubs, but I loved it. I just absolutely fell in love with the whole place and was so determined that they were going to sign me as a 14-year-old and I'd have that opportunity to stay there. So what I remember from that first week up there is just what an incredible environment to be a part of. Now I just wanted that week to go on forever because I just loved it.
Yeah, it's really important. Is it just that love of the game and love, especially when you find that place that, like I say, it feels like a family. So obviously you're at United. And again, I think especially the era that you were playing in, obviously with Sir Alex Ferguson and Roy Keane being there, and people talk about just the levels that they require at the club. Did you, as a player in the youth setup, did you kind of feel that those expectations from the
Yeah, I
club?
think you feel them expectations from the second that you sign for the club, whether it's as a young boy or as as a professional player. The standards are so high, and rightly so, because of the the organisation that it is and the environment that they create. So I think it's what's drilled into you straight away of what you are as a person is probably more important than what you do on the football pitch. So it's always around sort of working hard, being respectful, being humble. That was just as important as what you do on the pitch. And then the football sort of comes with that. So I think they were always teaching you life lessons. And then the football, if you were good enough, the football would come with that in terms of the coaching and the incredible coaching that they give you as well. So you certainly understand from a young age what is expected of you when you represent that football club.
And obviously, again, to break in at United again at that era was really going to take something. And again, when you're that young age, when you're near the first team, and you know people are starting to look at you as a potential first team player, what are you doing away from the game to try and get yourself at that level to break in, to play alongside Beckham and Giggs, etc.?
Yes, I think from my personal point of view, that's probably where I didn't do enough to sort of to be at that level. In terms of, I was always I just loved playing football, so I'd just turn up, train, go home. I didn't want to do the other stuff that came with it, the stuff before training, the stuff after training. I was always just about playing on the pitch. I think looking back now, probably one of the big reasons that I didn't make it there was because of the problems that I had with injuries and whatnot. So if having the time again, it would have been important to strengthen my body and do them other things that were certainly told to me were really important for me. But in my mind as a young kid, it was just about what you done on the pitch. And that was 20 years ago. So now in this day and age, them things are even more prevalent now in terms of the athletic ability that all the top players and all professional players have got.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such a big factor now, isn't it? The physical aspect of the game. So why then, obviously, again, playing in that team, you've got so many famous names, but why were Paul Scholes and Ryan Giggs, why were they able to play at that level for the period of time they did and be so successful?
I think the biggest thing, what I mentioned to, what was drilled in that sort of mentality of what it meant every day to play for Man United. I must have trained, I weren't at the club a huge amount of time in the first team, but I can't think of one training session where Paul Scholes wasn't incredible in a training session. That consistency and drive to do things properly every single day and sort of be on top of your game and demand the standards of yourself and demand the standards of others to be so high. So the mentality that them two players had that you said, and many others there at the same time as well, was incredible, to do everything right and to stay at that football club. The longevity that Giggs and Scholes had at the time, they stayed there when I'm sure there was options to go to another club and try something different, but they loved that club so much and were there from the age of 9-10 years old. And it's so heartwarming to see players like that have achieved so much and come through the youth system and come out the other end, and just see sort of when you play with them what grounded, humble people that they are as well.
Yeah. Again, you've just said it there about the high standards that they set, and I don't think you can use the phrase high standards without kind of mentioning Sir Alex Ferguson. Just he's so famous for being so demanding. So obviously you're in the first team squad. How does he get that message across in terms of, to play United, we expect this?
Yes,
and how does that kind of resonate with you?
the message is, the message. The man was obviously, like you say, the high standards, but he'd make you want to work harder than you ever thought you could. You'd want to do absolutely anything to impress the manager. If the manager said well done to you, it was a feeling like nothing else you'd ever get. Like, it was incredible. The way he built relationships with people was the genius of the man. I mentioned earlier about, I went up for that first trial as a 14-year-old boy. At the end of the week, we played a game against Nottingham Forest at Littleton Road, and Sir Alex Ferguson was there watching the game. By the time that I'd got home, got the train home to the little village Meldriff where I live near Cambridge, my mum picked me up from the train station, and the first thing she said to me was, Sir Alex Ferguson phoned me up this afternoon and asked her permission to sign for the club. And obviously I'm 14 years old, and Alex Ferguson, there's only one club I'm ever going to sign for. And it weren't just me that he'd do that to. He'd do it for all the young players. He knew every single part of that club inside out. I was at the club as a first team player at Carrington, and there'd be under 10, under 11 academy boys in the canteen, and the manager would know every single one of their names. He'd know what their parents were called. He'd know a little detail about them to make them feel 50 foot tall, make them feel on top of the world. He'd treat the dinner ladies and the kit men just as well as he'd treat Roy Keane or Ryan Giggs. He just had a way of pulling the whole football club together, and everyone pulling in the same direction, wanting to work as hard as they can for him, but for the whole club, which obviously got the success that he got, which is absolute genius, really, because it is the relationships you build with people in any organisation. If you've got a good relationship with the person at the top of an organisation, you want to work harder for him. And that was Sir Alex, and everyone wanted to do that.
Yeah. It's incredible, really. Like I say, hearing you talking about it, obviously seeing it firsthand, must have been something special. And obviously, whilst at United, you spent quite a bit of time out on loan. And obviously, people think differently about the loan system, but it is a great way to obviously go away and potentially impress, and go and find yourself. And were you in Belgium with Royal Antwerp?
Yeah, so my first loan from the club, the Antwerp loan, and then the Reading and Burnley loans were both for completely different reasons, really. I think that the Antwerp loan was an opportunity to go and show what I could do in the club, to see what I could do to bring me back. I had a really good 2 years as a scholar at Man United, done really well and sort of played really well in the youth teams, in the reserve team. Only played one first team game, which was a Worthington Cup game, but sort of went home for my summer break after my second year. And I think everyone was expecting me to go back and be in and around the first team. And I think sort of signed a professional contract at United. I was earning a lot more money, and I went home for the summer and certainly had a good summer, and probably thought I was big time then, and I'd go out with my mates. I wouldn't do enough to go back in the best shape possible. And I went back and I was nowhere near the first team. I was with the reserves and weren't playing particularly well there. So the club decided it would be best for me to go and get some experience of first team football. So I sort of jumped at the opportunity. I couldn't wait to get out to Antwerp and play. And from the second I got there, I saw like an old stadium, but the crowd it was like a typical European game. There'd be smoke bombs going off. The crowd were lunatic, like shouting, screaming, and the atmosphere was electric. And I remember playing my first game and scoring a goal, doing well again in my first game, and the fans all singing my name. And it was the first time I'd ever played in front. That was the first time anyone had sung my name, and I just absolutely loved it, really. And from there, my confidence just built, and I had a really good, probably 8-9 months in Belgium where I played good football, and then was eventually called back to Man United.
Did so obviously those opportunities to go out alone, especially in a foreign country, were they moments that you really had to sort of find yourself a little bit, and to just find something new about you, and really sort of find yourself, and obviously have to be challenged so differently? socially, and in so many other ways.
Yeah, definitely. It was a fantastic life experience going to stay in a different country. For one, I was there for sort of the end of one season and the start of the other. So for the first season, I lived in a hotel with a couple of the other lads. And the second season, my girlfriend came over and I lived with her in a flat. So it was all different experience. I think life as a footballer, pretty much everything's done for you. So it wasn't that much of a challenge, but more managing my own time, where in Manchester, it was always the same sort of schedule. You'd see the same people and do the same things. In Antwerp, it was about learning how to be a professional. You're living on your own in a hotel, but you're still sort of on your own. You've got to manage your time. You've got to be in the best possible condition to play the game. So it was a real learning process and real feeling of sort of becoming a man. You sort of gone out there. I'm 18, 19 years old, but I'm living in a different country. It gives you that sort of feeling that you've grown up now. I'm growing up fast. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Where in digs at United, it was probably still sort of being treated a bit of a kid. But now I was in a man's game, living in the big wide world on my own, as it were.
Do you think sort of that experience really did help, and I'm sure helped many, because obviously Royal Antwerp was used by United to send out many players on loan. Do you think that experience really was key for you to then push for the first team and obviously play within the English game?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I think if it wasn't for that loan, I maybe would have slipped away at United, just sort of trundling along in the reserves and not sort of. It really gave me that push. And again, as I mentioned, when I was 8 or 9 playing my first game, and I got that early success when I played. I think that scoring that goal in my first game for Antwerp really got people behind me and really gave me loads of confidence. So it definitely a huge part of my development was going off to Belgium and playing first team football.
Was there any Belgian chants with the name Chadwick in it?
There was a few. I was a popular player out there, and as a young boy, I'm sure any professional would say to have that is such a huge boost. Maybe not as much when you get older and older, it doesn't affect you that much. But as for me, and I'm sure a lot of when players were young and they get even the crowd singing their name and positive things said about them, it does give you a huge amount of confidence.
No, that sounds, like I say, sounds really impressive, and thank you for taking your time to have a chat. And it's, like I say, really impressive to hear about all your experiences, and hopefully those watching will take something away on their journey.
Yeah, no worries, Tom. Enjoyed speaking to you.